Welcome to Blackspot. Today we're diving into a set of documents that lay out a really fascinating and bold hypothetical peace plan for Gaza dated 2025. We're going to explore the ambitious proposal that was designed to end the war, and then we'll look at the documented breakdown, the gap between the plan on paper and the reality on the ground. So let's just jump right into the core question these documents force us to ask. Imagine it, a massive peace deal is signed. The world kind of breathes a collective sigh of relief, but then, within days, the whole thing starts to crack. That is the exact scenario we're unpacking today.
And I have to be crystal clear about this from the get-go. Everything we're about to cover is based on source documents describing a hypothetical scenario set in 2025. We are simply analyzing the plan and its documented outcomes exactly as they are presented.
Okay, so how do we even get to a point where this kind of deal was on the table? Let's back up a bit and set the scene.
To really get this plan, you have to understand the history leading up to it, right? And the sources lay out a pretty grim timeline. You've got decades of occupation, the blockade, the horrific attacks on October 7th, and then this devastating war. According to these documents, by 2025, the Palestinian death toll had soared past 68,000. That created this immense international pressure to find any kind of off-ramp.
And into this incredibly desperate situation, the documents describe a hypothetical second-term President Trump stepping in with his huge, comprehensive 20-point proposal. The stated goal? To end the conflict for good. So let's see what's inside. And the announcement, as the sources document it, was not subtle. It was designed to be a showstopper. On October 12, 2025, the declaration was made. Simply, the war is over. That set some incredibly high expectations from the very first moment.
Now let's look at how this was all supposed to be run, because this is where the mechanics get really interesting. The plan called for Gaza to be temporarily governed by a committee of Palestinian experts, technocrats. But the real power, the ultimate oversight, would be in the hands of this brand new International Board of Peace. And who would be chairing it? Donald Trump himself, with people like former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair also on board.
And then you've got the security and economic side of things, and it's a classic carrot and stick deal. The stick? Hamas members had to give up their weapons to get amnesty. The carrot? A massive economic development plan to rebuild Gaza, funded internationally, all centered around a new special economic zone. The whole thing was really built on this big bet, that you could use economic hope to fix a political nightmare.
So that's the big picture, the grand vision. But how do you actually start something like that? Well, that brings us to the nitty-gritty of the Phase 1 agreement.
As you can see, Phase 1 was all about moving fast to build some trust. It kicks off with an immediate ceasefire, then a really quick Israeli withdrawal to something called the Yellow Line, followed by the swift exchange of hostages for prisoners. And all the while, aid is supposed to be pouring in. But here's the kicker. These steps were set up like dominoes. They had to happen in order and on time. If just one of them faltered, the whole thing could just fall apart.
And this is the moment in the documents where everything shifts. We move from the plan, the deal on paper, to what actually happened on the ground. And this is where you start to see this massive gap open up.
And for a minute there, it really looked like it was working. I mean, on October 13th, just like the deal said, Hamas released all 20 of the remaining living hostages. You can just imagine the relief. It was a huge, concrete win for the plan.
But that hope, well, it didn't last long. Almost immediately, the picture gets a lot darker. According to the Gaza government media office, which is cited in these sources, Israeli forces were documented committing nearly 500 ceasefire violations in just the first 44 days. Almost 500.
And those weren't just numbers on a page. The sources go on to report that by December of 2025, these alleged violations had a devastating human cost. 394 Palestinians killed, with over 1,000 more injured. That's a heavy, heavy shot-out to cast over a ceasefire.
You see the same gap, this same promise versus reality, when you look at the humanitarian aid. The deal promised up to 600 trucks a day, a huge number. But what actually got through in those first few weeks? The documents show an average of just 145. That's not even a quarter of what was promised.
And to make these statistics feel real, the sources point to specific tragic events. There's one documented incident on October 17th. Israeli forces reportedly fired on a bus in Gaza City, and 11 members of a single family, the Abu Shaban family, were killed. Now, the IDF's position, as stated in the documents, was that the bus had gone into a restricted zone and didn't stop after warning shots were fired.
So, you've got this deal that's succeeding in some ways and failing spectacularly in others. How did the rest of the world react to this mess? As you can imagine, the international community was completely split.
On one hand, you have the Palestinian Authority. The sources say they actually called the efforts sincere and determined. That's a big deal. It shows they were still trying to work within the plan despite all the problems.
But then, on the complete other end of the spectrum, you have people like the former PLO spokesperson Diana Batu. The sources quote her as saying the plan normalized genocide. For her, this wasn't peace. It was just a way to make the status quo permanent under a different name.
And that division was everywhere you looked. I mean, just look at the United States. The documents say they were privately telling Netanyahu off for violations, but at the same time they were blocking travel documents for the PA. It's contradictory. Meanwhile, you have the UN raising red flags about international law, the ICC moving forward with its own investigation, and media outlets basically asking, is this plan really about peace or is it about something else entirely?
So when you take a step back, what these documents really lay out is this incredibly complex picture. You have a peace deal born out of unbelievable suffering. It has these tiny glimmers of hope, but it's ultimately just swamped by violations and a total lack of trust. And it leaves us with a really tough question. What does a scenario like this tell us about the massive, massive difference between just ending the fighting and actually building a real lasting peace? Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on Black Spot. If you found this analysis valuable, please like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.